Now that the World Series is officially over, 8 Atlanta Braves players are free agents, and this team has decisions to make. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, your home for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. It's also a newsletter. BravesToday.com is the Braves Substack. And now that the World Series has concluded, Los Angeles Dodgers, as looked pretty inevitable after Game 1, took down the New York Yankees to have their first non-Mickey Mouse championship in quite a long time. Very happy for Freddie Freeman that he won a World Series, or I guess a second World Series. Side note, you can be happy for Freddie Freeman without dogging Matt Olson. Go back and check out the show, the Matt Olson show from earlier this week, to hear more about that. But now that the World Series has concluded, 8 Atlanta Braves players are no longer contracted with the organization. The way the timeline works here is the day after the conclusion of the World Series. So today, players officially become free agents. Now, they cannot sign until 5 p.m. Eastern, 5 days after the conclusion of the World Series. They can't sign with a new team. If you are losing a player, you have a 5-day exclusive window that you can negotiate with that player to attempt to retain them. Now, usually, if a player's gotten this far in the process, that's not going to happen, right? You're not going to get this far towards free agency just to re-sign with your team. But deadline spur action. And so, starting today, these 8 players that are free agents, you have 5 days to attempt to retain them. So let's go through this list. Let's go through these players, what they did, the odds of them coming back, and all of that. The number 1 player of the 8 on the list, and we're going to do the option decisions and the arbitration-eligible guys later in the show, so stick around for that. Number 1 on the list, I think in everybody's wish list, performance-wise, every metric you could possibly have, starting pitcher Max Fried. Max Fried is officially now a free agent and is no longer under contract with the Atlanta Braves. He went 11-10 last year with a 3.25 ERA in 29 starts. He threw 2 complete games, one of which was a shutout. His 2 complete games and his 1 shutout tied for the league lead. Threw 174 and a third innings, with 166 strikeouts, so 8.6 strikeouts per 9 innings, 257 walks, 2.9 walks per 9 innings. He was an all-star this year. That was his second career all-star nod. This one is going to be really interesting, right? Max Fried went through arbitration with Atlanta 4 times as a Super 2 player, right? 2021, he got $3.5 million. 2022, he got $6.85. 2023, he got $13.5 million. And then in 2024, his salary was $15 million. And the way that he came about this was really interesting. Him and the team came to a deal in 2021 on that $3.5 million, and he avoided arbitration. 22 and 23, they could not agree, and they went to arbitration. Atlanta won one of those hearings. Atlanta lost one of those hearings. 2024, they settled prior to arbitration. This is the one where I think a lot of Braves fans, I think I speak for a lot of Braves fans when I say we don't expect Max Fried to come back. Again, typically, we talked about this in the Spencer Schwellenbach show earlier this week. If you are going to sign a player to an extension, it typically happens before now. It typically happens before the player reaches free agency. That's not a guarantee, right? That's not a certainty. Aaron Judge was a free agent, made it to free agency, and returned to the New York Yankees. Aaron Nola made it to free agency, got an offer from the Atlanta Braves, and then went back to the Philadelphia Phillies. I do think the concern here is for a player to make it back to your team in free agency, you typically have to come in pretty close to what their biggest financial deal is. We've talked about this a lot on the show. Atlanta does not have anybody signed on a multi-year deal for more than $22 million. All of Atlanta's contracts have capped at that amount. Now, is that an absolute thing? No. The Freddie Freeman deal was reportedly more than that. The Aaron Nola deal was reportedly more than that. Alex Anthopoulos has gone over that financial, I'm gonna call it a limit, even though it's not actually a limit. That self-imposed cap, I would say. Josh Donaldson in 2019 signed for $23 million on a one-year deal. Again, the Freddie offer, the Nola offer was over that. But it feels increasingly likely, I think a lot of Braves fans agree with me, that someone is going to give more money than what Max Fried would get from Atlanta. Some of the comps that I was looking at to figure out where he would come in, Spot Track gave him a $22.7 million projection. They said 6 years and $136 million. That would make him a top 15 starting pitcher by salary and a top 50 MLB player by salary. And their comparisons here were 4 players. Kevin Gausman, who signed at age 30 for 5 years and $110. That's $22 million a year. Sonny Gray, who signed last offseason for 3 years and $75 million at $25 million per. He signed at age 34. It's an incredibly backloaded deal. It's a weird deal by St. Louis to do. Carlos wrote, unless you assume that they were counting on not having Goldschmidt on the roster and probably not having Arenado on the roster to pay for that. Carlos Rodon, another lefty, 6 years, $162 to the Yankees. I think it was 2 off seasons ago. $27 million salary. Aaron Nola re-upped for 7 years and $172, which comes out to just over $24.5 million. Both Rodon and Nola were 30 years old when they signed those deals. I don't quite think Spot Track is on the right. I think that group is fine to compare Max Fried to. I think where they go in here and they do their regression, they initially have it at 6 years, 149 and change. When they take those deals, adjust them for age and things like that, which is just under $25 million a year. They then go and they reduce Fried's deal based on games started per year, innings versus these other guys, K through 9, and all of these other things that don't necessarily, I think, reflect the lack of top-end starting pitching, especially left-handed starting pitching in this class. So they finished with 6 years and 136, so $22.7 million. I think that original projection, 6 years, 150, is probably closer to where Max Fried will actually be. Are the Braves comfortable spending $25 million for 6 years of Max Fried in his 30s? I don't know. He'll turn 31 in January. We don't know, but we expect him to not return. If you feel differently, let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you. My number 2 of these guys, might be a little bit of a shocker here, AJ Minter. Reliever AJ Minter. He is 31. He turned 31 in early September. Ended the year on the injured list with that hip injury. His ERA was fine this year when he was on the mound. 2.62 ERA, better than last year. Not as good as his amazing 2022. 39 games, 34 and a third innings, struck out 35. His strikeout rate was down from his career highs. He's averaged 10.9 strikeouts per 9 innings, and the last 2 seasons have been 12.1, 11.4. Down to 9.2 this year. Again, the effects of the hip injury. We talked about this in the bullpen gas episode from last week. His velocity was down. A lot of things were down. AJ Minter also had gone through arbitration. He was making $6.2 million. And this is one where he's always settled with Atlanta. 4 years, he was a Super 2 player as well. 4 years, it was $1.3 million, 2.2. I'm going to round to 4.3. It was like 4.2875. So 4.3 and 6.22. He avoided arbitration every time with Atlanta. Reportedly, he likes the organization. He wants to stay. The spot track projection for him is 2 years and $5.4 million. That's $2.7 million average annual salary. 62nd highest paid relief pitcher. If that is the deal, Atlanta signs that deal 7 days a week and Sunday after church. I don't think that is going to be the deal for AJ Minter. I think he will get more. Their projections here, they had him 3 years, $9.17 million. This is based on the comps they gave him of Eric Swanson, Chad Green, Jason Adam, and Dylan Floro. It is possible that the injury either lingers or has teams a little bit scared. So maybe you see AJ Minter signed for something like that. It just feels odd that he would take a more than 50% pay cut, that somebody out there wouldn't say, we believe you're going to be healthy. We've seen the medicals. We're going to give you $3, $4, $5 million on a 2-year deal. $5 million each on a 2-year deal. So I think he should come back. I think Atlanta should try to sign him as your third lefty in the pen to go with Dylan Lee and Aaron Bummer. We'll get to both those guys in the next segment because you have decisions to make on them as well. But we'll see what happens with AJ Minter. I feel the most confident in this entire list of bringing back AJ Minter. The third guy in here is Charlie Morton, okay? Uncle Chuck turns 41 years old in November. November 12th is his birthday. He went 8-10 with a 4.19 ERA this year and 165 1/3 innings. Made 30 starts for the fourth consecutive year with Atlanta. He broke 30 starts. He had 33 and 21, 31 and 22, 30 last year, 30 this year. He beat last year by exactly 2 innings. His strikeout rate went down from 10.1 per 9 to 9.1 per 9. Now, his walk rate also went down 4.6 to 3.5 per 9 innings. So his hit by pitch went from 12 to 18, though. So, it offsets some of the differences in the walks, right? I expect Charlie Morton to retire. That's not intel, that's speculation. He did talk a little bit about being away from his family. His family lives in Florida. Part of the reason he signed with Atlanta when he left Tampa Bay, didn't really want him back. But Atlanta is close enough to his home for spring where he's relatively nearby. Maybe he goes back to Tampa on a cheap deal for 1 year. Maybe he comes back to Atlanta. I do think it would be on a cheaper deal than the $20 million that he got. That deal's been remarkably consistent for Charlie Morton. When he signed with his contracts for Atlanta, that first year was $15 million. And then after that, it's been 20. This was the club option for 20. He is now a complete free agent. There is no more club option here. And so I don't expect him to be back. Maybe he wants one more shot at a reduced salary, but I think Charlie Morton is probably done in Atlanta. Again, if you bring him back, you're probably not bringing him back at a $20 million salary, considering that he would project to be your fifth starter next year, right? Chris Sale, Ronald Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach. At some point in time, Spencer Strider's back. I don't know exactly when that will be. You're expected to have Grant Holmes. Morton would be your fourth or fifth, right? And so because of that, you're probably in a situation where you bring him back, it's for less than $20 million. The rest of this list, I have my number 4 as Gio Urshela. And that's going to surprise some people because a lot of people are asking for Whit Merrifield to come back. He's on my list. I have Urshela ahead of Merrifield simply because, one, I think Urshela will be cheaper. I don't think he will cost you as much. Again, the spot track projection is for a 1-year, $950 million deal. $950,000 deal. $950 million is a lot of money. $950,000 for Gio Urshela. I feel like he would be a more versatile backup than Whit Merrifield. He can actually play shortstop. Whit Merrifield, people asked for it. Whit Merrifield has literally never played a single play at shortstop in Major League Baseball. He did it some in the minors. He never once did it in the majors. I do feel like you have more flexibility for Urshela, even though Merrifield can play the outfield and Urshela cannot. And he's probably cheaper. Whit Merrifield, like I'll remind folks, he signed a legitimate actual deal coming off of last season. Philly signed him to $8 million and a club option for 2025 and then cut him. He's also said he feels like he does better with everyday playing time. I don't think that's something he's going to get until there is an injury in Atlanta. Do I think he would be better as an everyday starter than Gio Urshela? I do. Do I think that it's worth paying him, I would assume, $5 million when you can get Urshela for probably $1 million and Merrifield can't help you at short? I do think it's not worth spending that much more on Merrifield than on Urshela. Both of them stepped in perfectly fine to help out last year. Urshela in 36 games batted .265, had 4 homers, 15 RBI. Whit Merrifield in 42 games batted .248 with 1 homer and 4 RBI. Again, I'm probably taking Urshela over Merrifield, but they are both free agents. You have the options on both. Again, I would expect it to be more likely you would bring back Urshela than Merrifield. The last 3 on here, relief pitcher John Brebbia. It's probably a minor league deal if you bring him back. Remember, he was claimed off of waivers from the White Sox. He did not actually get that much run in Atlanta. Appeared in 5 games, 6 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks to 9 strikeouts. I'd bring him back on a cheap deal, a cheap 1 year or a minor league deal. Jesse Chavez told us before the season he was going to retire. He didn't confirm that during the season, but I would expect him to be gone. It would be his age 41 season. And then Adam Duvall never really got going for signing in spring training. He finished the season. He barely saw the field in the final 2 months, played in 104 games, batted .182. There's almost no way that they bring back Adam Duvall for 2025. In just a minute, we're going to go through the option decisions and the arbitration eligibles, because these are where you actually have to make some tough decisions. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about the fact that we are now officially in free agency. Outside guys can't sign for 5 days after the World Series, but since the World Series ended last night, your contracted players are officially free agents. We broke them all down in the first segment. This segment, though, is going to be the option decisions and the arbitration-eligible decisions that you have to make. Now, the decision dates for these are different. The options, and these are all club options because Atlanta does not give out player options or mutual options. All your option decisions have to be made by 5 days after the World Series. The same deadline for free agency is your option decision deadline. And that is so those players, if you are not picking up their option, or if they have an opt-out or a player option that they have to pick up, they can enter the free agent pool when everybody else does, okay? So 5 days after the World Series, your arbitration guys, your decision to tender them a contract or not, the non-tender deadline is November 22nd. If you don't tender them a deadline by then, you have to agree to a contract by mid-January. We don't have the exact date of that. It's not always the same every single season. The arbitration deadline, if you do not have a contract by that arbitration deadline, you then have a hearing in February. Atlanta is one of many teams that do what's called file and trial. If we don't have an agreement by the deadline, we submit our number and we go to the hearing. We do not negotiate with you after that deadline unless it's a multi-year contract. So once we give that arbitration number, that's it. We're done negotiating with you. We will go to the hearing. We will make our case. The arbitrator will decide my number or your number. There's no middle ground here. It's my number or your number. So the option decisions, you have 4 of these. Alex Anthopoulos told us after the season when they had that press conference, there's 3 of these they are going to pick up. They have not logistically done it yet because they wanted to wait. I think his wording was something like, God forbid something were to happen. They actually wait to do it until now, sometime in the next 5 days. But they have indicated they are picking up the Marcell Ozuna option. That is a $16 million option with a $1 million buyout. So if they did not pick it up, they would owe him $1 million that would go on the 2025 salary. Travis d'Arnaud is an $8 million option with no buyout. And then Aaron Bummer, left-hand pitcher Aaron Bummer, is a $7.25 million option with a $1.25 million buyout. Now, if you pick up this club option, you then have the ability to club option him again next offseason. He has a second club option year on his deal. It is for $7.25 million as well, but there is no buyout. So if he falls off the face of the earth in 2025, you can let him walk for nothing in 2026. The one that he did not talk about, and I am choosing to believe that is on purpose, is Luke Jackson. Luke Jackson signed this deal with the Giants and was traded over in the Jorge Soler deal. It is a $7 million club option with a $2 million buyout. I would expect Atlanta is interested in bringing back Luke Jackson. I do not think they want to do it at the $7 million figure. You look at what he did when he came over. He pitched 18 innings across 16 games, 0-1 with a 4.50 ERA. He allowed 11 runs, 9 earned, and 11 walks in 18 innings with 26 strikeouts. The stuff is not bad. The stuff is still there. The velocity is good. The slider man's still throwing his sliders, but the results weren't there. He looked good in that first season in San Francisco in 2023 when he came back from injury, 2.97 ERA in 33 innings. Ever since then, he's not looked the same. I would not be shocked if they brought back Luke Jackson. I would be shocked if they brought back Luke Jackson on a $7 million contract or club option. He is probably your likely non-tender guy 5 days after the World Series. And then they negotiate him coming back. Maybe it's a smaller major league deal. Maybe it's a minor league or a split deal where if you make the major league roster, this is your salary. But if you're in the minors, this is your salary. Give him the hope that, hey, if you can perform, you can make the team. Maybe he takes over the Jesse Chavez role, things like that. You also have 6 arbitration-eligible guys. And again, that non-tender deadline, you have to decide by, November 22nd, whether or not you are tendering these guys a contract or not. If you'll remember last year, Atlanta made a trade the minutes before the deadline. Maybe it was the night before, but right there by the non-tender deadline. And they shipped out multiple players to get Aaron Bummer. Nicky Lopez, who was arbitration eligible. Michael Soroka, who was arbitration eligible for the final time. Braden Shoemake was not. He was on the 40-man roster. Jared Schuster, I don't believe, was arbitration eligible. He was on the 40-man roster. And then prospect Riley Goins. But they cleared 3 40-man spots to get Aaron Bummer. I don't expect a deal that big this year. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. I wouldn't be shocked if 1 or 2 guys in this group maybe, and that's really probably just Huascar, was moved. But I do think they might clear the 40-man roster out a little bit to make some space. I don't know how many of these guys. I don't think you're going to see a repeat of a 5-for-1. That's not a very common deal in MLB to make. But your options here, Ramon Laureano, this is the big one. All these projections come from MLB trade rumors, by the way. Not everybody agrees on what the arbitration projections are, obviously. He is very close to 6 years of service time. He's probably punching air right now. He missed it by a few days. But $6.1 million is the projection. I've said before, I think you bring Ramon Laureano back. You're probably looking to trade Jorge Soler. We had that conversation back and forth. Do you trade Ozuna? Do you trade Soler? What do you do? Ozuna does have 10-5 rights. It is a lot harder to trade Ozuna. You probably, if you're looking at trading one of those two, you trade Jorge Soler. But if you bring back Ramon Laureano, I think it's with the understanding that Jorge Soler is on his way out. I don't think you bring back both Soler and Laureano and have Jared Kelenic all in the wings. And you, in essence, have Ozuna, who is a DH only. You have Soler, who is much more useful as a DH than he is as an outfielder. And then Ronald Acuna Jr., who may need time at DH this year like he did in 2022 when he came back from the ACL the last time. Kevin Biggio, the infielder, 5 years of service time, projected for $4.3 million. I will eat this hat if they bring back Kevin Biggio at $4.3 million. I don't see any way whatsoever that Kevin Biggio makes it back at that salary this year. They claimed him off of waivers when he was DFA'd. They played him very briefly. He did not spend very much time in Atlanta. That's not a guy you pay $4 million for. Okay. Especially with this team potentially wanting to get under the luxury tax for a year and reset it. That's a different show. Your other options here, Huascar Yanoa, 3 years of service time, 3 years and change, projected for $825,000. This is a really tricky one because of the options. I don't think you have the flexibility on Huascar if he struggles, if he's not good, whatever it is. Fangraphs reports he has no options left. So he has to make your bullpen or else he's gone. Now, that's not a lot of money. Maybe you say, yes, it's $825,000. If he doesn't make the bullpen, whatever, we'll just eat that. Not a big deal. But maybe they bring him back as a reliever, and if we can have him spot start and get him in shape, he's a spot starter. Maybe he can move into the rotation later. It's risky. But if you feel like you can use him as a reliever, that's not a very expensive cost. I feel like that they probably, in that case, bring him back for the bullpen. Jared Kelenic, 2 years and change. He's a Super 2 for the first year of arbitration here. $2.3 million is the projection. I think it's not a lock, but I think that he's incredibly likely to come back in arbitration. They probably agree to a deal that avoids arbitration. And if nothing else, you can start him in AAA if you have too many outfielders. I do think he still has quite a bit of potential, and there's no reason to give up on Jared Kelenic right away, especially after all the dead salary you took on in 2024 to get him out of Seattle. I definitely think they don't give up on him just yet. I expect him to be tendered. He will be back for 2025, although we don't know what his role will be. Dylan Lee, 2 years and change of service time, projected for $1.2 million. You absolutely bring him back. That would give you, he would be obviously a lefty out of the pen. Aaron Bummer's a lefty out of the pen. Angel Perdomo is expected back at some point in time this year. Same situation as Spencer Strider. A lot of signs point to it could be the start of the season, but we just don't know that. So that's why I didn't talk about him a lot in the lefty in the bullpen episode, because we don't know when you'll get him, but he will at some point in time be back. That gives you 3 lefties. AJ Minter could be a 4th. You've got options here, right? The last one here, outfielder Eli White, $800,000. He's at 2 years and change of service time. This is incredibly cheap. Again, they trusted his defense well enough to bring him up late in the year. They played him at defense in place of Jorge Soler late in games. He can pinch run. They even let him play a little bit of second base with some flexibility. I don't see a reason you don't tender him a deal. That's something, full disclosure, I say that. I don't know how many options he has. You may not have a lot of flexibility to move him around. Matter of fact, I don't think he has any options left. But either way, same as Huascar Yanoa. That's a pretty cheap deal if you end up needing to DFA him to put somebody else on the roster. What they did with Forrest Wall, they ended up DFAing him to get somebody else. You can do that. It's not a huge amount to eat, especially compared to you eating significant amounts of money last year. I mean, you brought on Joey Wendell, and then you let him go, and you ate a bunch of money off of that. You ate a bunch of money on Matt Carpenter when you traded him. Evan White when you traded him. It's just, I don't see a reason why you ate money on Tyler Matzik, right? I don't see a reason why you don't bring Eli White back, given what he can do for you if you need him to. And if you look at, if you don't have Jared Kelenic on the opening day roster, you don't have a backup center fielder on this roster. Maybe it's Ramon Laureano, but I do feel like Eli White has a role in the organization, and that Gwinnett outfield of Jared Kelenic, Eli White, and JP Martinez is not a bad young outfield for AAA. So all my Stripers friends will have fun watching that. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Also, leave us a 5-star review if you would. Really helps folks discover the show. We're starting to collect those. A reminder, every Friday is Listener Friday. We do fan mail, we do mailbags, listener ideas of shows, things like that. So send those over to us. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Braves_today. If it's long, contact at bravestoday.com. Just email it to me. Love to hear from you. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.